We're going to do part 2. If you could turn with me to the gospel according to the Lucan writer, chapter 14, and we're going to begin reading at verse 1. The Lucan account of the synoptic gospel according to him, beginning at chapter 14, beginning at verse 1. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him away. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath, will you not immediately pull him out?" And they had nothing to say. When he noticed how his guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable: "When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished may than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, 'Give this man your seat.' Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, 'Friend, move up to a better place.' Then you will be honored in the presence of all your fellow guests. For everyone who humbles himself will be exalted." Then Jesus said to the host, "When you give a lunch or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." You may be seated in the presence of God's word. You may be seated. We once again thank you for coming out to our second installment, part 2 of the Dirty Church. And today, just for a moment, brief moment, I want to talk to you about the church that practices humility. The church that practices humility. I am intentional about putting practice in it, because I don't think we have it, all of it, until we are not perfected until on that day when Christ returns. So the church that practices humility is an intentional thought that is countercultural to our contemporary lens and what we live in today. I would like to give a quick historical overview of some important characters in the text that we just read. If you have your Bible, most Bibles will say Jesus at a Pharisee's house would be the context that it would be in. So number one, we want to talk about Jesus. Number two, we're going to talk about the Pharisees, the Herodians, and Herod Antipas, and how Jesus interrupted first century religion with a radical, rebellious, revolutionary message of what church was supposed to be. Remember on last week, we had the context that 2 Chronicles chapter 7 said that if my people are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then they will hear from heaven, and then I will heal the land. That is the crux of this, of the title of this sermon, and the what we're going to be dealing with is that maybe what we look at church being may not be what church really is. And because Jesus was a radical, rebellious, revolutionary, and because of his complete disregard for the religious sect of that time and as that day, Jesus was killed as a terrorist, hung on a tree for all to see. The tree was not the purpose to really hurt Jesus. It was for everybody to see that if you come against Rome, this is going to be your fate. To understand why the church is so important and why humility must be a vital part of the church's existence, I would have to tell you about four of some of the major religious sects of Jesus' town. There were some Pharisees. Some of you know about the Sadducees. There was a group called the Essenes, and there was another group called the Herodians. Now, these were all working in the religion. It's sort of like some of us Baptists, some of us Free Will Baptists, some of us Primitive Baptists, some of us Missionary Baptists, Full Gospel Baptists. So the same thing that goes on today was going on back when Jesus was alive, that there were many folks saying different things. And to understand, today we want to talk about one particular group called my Pharisees. And I like to call them my Pharisees because even today, Judaism still reverts back to trace their lineage back and what they believe to the Pharisees. The Pharisees really came to existence after the destruction of the first temple in 70 CE. Their belief system was that the Torah could be interpreted also as oral law. The Sadducees believed that they only go by the Torah as written according to Moses, but the Pharisees say it's a little different. They were known to be separate from people, and they were known to do things outside of what the Sadducees done. And of course, you know this. In case you haven't known, the same schisms that happened here is happening today. The same schism, the same thing. The Sadducees were elitists. They were the rich guys. They were the mega churches of the time. The Pharisees was an in-between. They were the ones who knew everything but didn't know nothing. And the Sadducees believed that Jesus could not come back from the dead and be reincarnated. So once Jesus was dead, he was dead. So that's why they're sad, you see. Because they didn't believe that Jesus was resurrected. So that made them sad, you see. Some prominent Pharisees that I want to just remind you that we uplift is one of the most prominent Pharisees was a brother by the name of Saul, who ended up being Paul. And he, even in the Roman text, say, I'm the Pharisee of Pharisees. So Paul is a good example of what Pharisees are today. Josephus was considered to be a Pharisee of Pharisees. If you look around today, the rabbinic Jews of today trace their beginnings back to the Pharisees. You say, Walter, what this got to do with the dirty church? Sometimes you need to read more than just your Bible and know a little bit about history to know where you get some of the stuff that you believe. And if you ever pick your Bible up at any moment in your lifetime of your Christian life, you will find out that the Pharisees were the main antagonists of Jesus. If you don't believe me, it said on the Sabbath when Jesus went to a prominent Pharisee house, he was being carefully watched. He was on the terror watch list from not only the Romans but also church folk. Now, what makes Jesus want to be on the terror watch list, Pastor Wilson? Well, Jesus had a very smart mouth, as Stefan tell me about myself. And Mark chapter 3, verse 6 gives a complete understanding that most religions can't come together, but a plot to kill Jesus, they will come together. And if you don't believe, Mark chapter 6 say, then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they can kill Jesus. If you don't believe it, I'll give you a moment. Don't worry. I'll wait if you need to read it. Because the Herodians did not get along with the Pharisees. But in order to want to kill Jesus, it's amazing how your enemies can come together if they want to do. It's some of these folk you call your friend ain't your folk. They waiting to stab you in the back. So the Pharisees was a group who Jesus always got into it with. The Pharisees were the one who brought the woman caught in adultery. It was the Pharisees. When Pastor Kevin said earlier this morning, when Jesus was walking on the Sabbath, picking grain, it was the Pharisees right there again, telling Jesus, you can't do that on the Sabbath. And Kevin, I appreciate you preaching out of my sermon this morning, sir, about the Sabbath. And now I owe you a backwards love offering. I'll take care of you. So I want to give some culture and context I want to make sure you're not reading this like you reading a book, 50 Shades of Grey. All y'all women, y'all know. Because men don't read anymore. We just believe whatever y'all say. That in order to understand why the church is dirty, you first must understand who the Pharisees were, why they did not like Jesus, and why they sought to kill him. Kendrick Lamar has a song out that says, "Be humble, sit down." And if you ever walked in some of these major synagogues or churches, buildings, storefronts, you sometimes ask yourself, what is the preacher talking about? And I know you're asking now, but I'm going to clean it up for you. The Pharisees, for me, are the closest to church folk today, for me. Because everybody can't be a Sadducee, because all of us don't have elitists, because we broke. Let's be honest, you working at 9 to 5 every day, you ain't elite. So then you can't be Herodians. Well, maybe our military may be a Herodian. If you remember Herod Antipas, the Herodians were his guard. They collected taxes from the Jewish by the Romans. So you can't be a Herodian because, of course, you're not out taxing people. And then you have the Essenes who were crazy folk, they believed. They were out eating bushes and doing what they do, so you can't. So the Pharisees, for me, Cecil, is the closest group to church that we can see. But they weren't humble. They weren't humble. And they believed that the oral law was good for teaching, correction, and everything. But when Jesus started talking about the oral law, they had a problem. And I want you to understand that when we read this, Jesus was not at Sunday supper with his mom and his daddy. Jesus was in a hostile territory when he started getting smart. It said one Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. Jesus asked the Pharisees and the experts of the law, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? Now this morning, Pastor Kevin did so eloquently and redefined the Sabbath as a day, not just you go to church, but sometimes Sabbath will cause you to do things that other folk tell you you're not supposed to do. In other words, your Sabbath can be every day at any opportunity. But the issue in the text was not that it was the Sabbath, but it was Jesus who was going to do the healing. It wasn't the issue that Jesus was about to heal a man with dropsy. If the man's sick, why we can't heal him? It reminds me of Franklin. It reminds me of Franklin that if you're going out doing the work that God called you to do, even the preachers will get together and start fighting against you. Y'all laugh, but because you're laughing lets me know that you ain't been in trouble in a while. And if you're going to do what God called you to do, there's going to be some trouble in your life. Whenever you're doing what God called you to do, people will watch you carefully. They're going to watch. They're going to listen. They're going to be attentive. And we shouting in church and people ready to stab you outside. Because whenever you're doing what God calls you to do, it normally causes uncomfortable situations for other people. When you want to build a group home on Natchez, and there's 7 churches in that community already who ain't go do it, they must watch you carefully. When you start feeding folks with the money out your pocket, people will start, Cecil, to watch you. When you decide you're going to go to rehab, get clean and hang around good men and women of God, people will start to watch you and say you the police, say you still on drugs, say you still drinking, say you, when you decide to do what God calls you to do, people go watch you. So Jesus, in his own mind, asked him, okay, the man's sick. He got the dropsy. I can heal him. But is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? Is the question. But here's what people will do when you're doing what God called you to do. Behind your back, they will talk about you, but in your face, you got to know how to make people silent. And it doesn't have to even be in a way that you're trying to do it. Sometimes you just living life, eating steak and shrimp, and doing what God has called you to do, and people, it uprupts. Listen, whenever you're doing God's will and you're disrupting what people think it should be, then you need to know you're with God. Because we have given a false sense of who Jesus is. We believe Jesus is in the house, the cars, the money, the power. And we out mad about gay marriage, and the church has the highest rate of divorce ever in the history of the church. And we think the stuff that we do is okay. And really, we're the problem. So when Jesus asked them, but they remain, so taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him away. Number one, humility can be dangerous. Because we have the wrong, we think humility is Jesus on the church fan and he's praying, right? He's that blue-eyed, blonde-haired guy, and he look like he ain't causing no trouble. He doing it. My grandfather back in Pensacola didn't let them fans come in our church. On one side of our fan was Dr. Martin Luther King. On the other side was a funeral home. And where I went to church, if you weren't out causing trouble, all my grandfather wanted in his church was some stained glass windows, and we had concrete floors. We had a Hammond organ on one side. We had a piano on the other side. And every Sunday morning, he would kill Jesus and raise him back up. Well, the reason why he killed him every week, because the deacon probably was taking all the money out the collection tray. And the reason why he killed Jesus every week, because they had ran him from Schumacher, Florida, and a nice white man came and told him, Mr. Simmons, you need to pack your family up. It was my father and his oldest brother, and they were children. And the Ku Klux Klan, because he owned his own brick mason building, the same school Stephen grew up in, my grandfather built that school, Pensacola Christian. And he told him, he said, Mr. Simmons, you need to pack your children up and leave Schumacher, Florida, because the Klan is coming to kill you. Now, he was a good white man, GWF. But what if he would have stood up and said, he ain't got to leave? That's not what we're going to do to Mr. Simmons. But we have this innate ability to believe Jesus is more humble than you make him. And here it is. It's like Jesus eating with the Pharisees is like the U.S. Army having dinner with ISIS. Y'all missed that one. Let me say it again. Jesus eating with the Pharisees is like the U.S. Army, the general of the Army or the Navy, going in, Brad, and having dinner with ISIS. So the very people who are going to put him on the cross, he had dinner healing people. And we so afraid to be anything like Jesus. Now, in context, Jesus ain't that guy. It don't matter what color he is. He ain't the guy on the fan. Because whenever he got around the Pharisees, they always had an altercation. And whenever Jesus answered anything the Pharisees had to say, he always had a smart reply for the Pharisees. He never gave them a way out because they had been antagonizing him the whole time. Now, some of you got people following you. Everybody that follow you ain't your friend. And everybody who following you ain't following you because you are the radical, revolutionary, rebellious person that you may believe you are. In dominoes, they say all money ain't good money. So every once in a while, you need to hold your money for the domino. But see, in church today, what we do, we always show our hand. And what has happened is we believe God is in our stuff. So, number one, humility can be dangerous. And number two, humility will always silence your idols. Dr. Martin Luther King says silence is the greatest weapon when speaking to injustice. But if a nation, country, or institution does not speak up against injustice, then that silence is the deadliest killer in the world. When you are walking in humility, it don't mean that you have to get spit and beat up. It means that you are so concerned with what God has called you to do, you don't care what other folks say. Let me say it again. When you are doing what God called you to do, humility comes easy. It doesn't mean you're a pushover. It just means I'm so in tune with my brother, because how can I love a God I've never seen and walk by my brother who hungry, nowhere to stay? And the question is, who is your brother? That's the great question. Who do you consider your brother or your sister? And most of us in church suffer from spiritual schizophrenia. That the moment we believe God gave us the stuff we have, we shout and slob and fall out. But the moment you have to become humble and may have to give up some of your stuff, you don't come to church. You stop answering your telephone and you call God all kind of names. Let's be clear on some of y'all church stuff. I have called God out before. But God has been faithful enough to answer. Number one, humility can be dangerous. Humility will silence your doubter, and humility will always lead to deliverance. Not a good word in the church, because in order to need to be delivered, you first got to be in trouble. We don't accept trouble well in the church. No, we don't do trouble well. We don't like trouble. And here Jesus always traveled with trouble. Everywhere he went. It is amazing that everybody go to church every Sunday and nobody never have nothing negative to say. No one, and people say, I have haters. No, baby, you don't have haters. You broke. Ain't nobody hating on you. Bill Gates got haters. Huh? Jay-Z has haters. Beyonce, you just crazy. You're just crazy. Ain't nobody hating on you. The car you drive need tires. Your children need clothes. You barely got food in your refrigerator. You got five. If I ask you to put $20 in the offering, you can't do it. So how do you have haters? I'm confused. When all you do is stay at home and watch TV, how do you have haters? If God, Jesus was humble enough to check somebody, and y'all won't check anybody. And you definitely won't go to a church that's checking people. Because when we look for a church, we look for how many folks in the pews. How many people on the praise team. Somebody told me today, a couple weeks ago at church, they say, well, the praise team was off. I say, well, if the praise team was off, then you off. Because if you come with worship, then you don't need a cheerleader to pump you up. And what we spend a lot of time is pumping up people in church. That's why you ain't shouting. Listen, come next month, I'll preach a sermon where you can run and shout. I promise you, I'll preach you something. Matter of fact, I will kill Jesus and raise him up. I promise you this. But this is not the time to be killing Jesus and raise him up when people dying in the street. This is not the time to kill Jesus every Sunday while children are hungry. This ain't the time to kill Jesus. This ain't the time to kill him. We need a live Jesus to fight. This ain't the time. This ain't a time to kill when people come and ask for help, and then you call many institutions in Williamson County and they won't help you out because they have enough money to buy $100,000 motorcycles, BMWs, but they can't find a place to put homeless. This ain't the time to be shouting. You shouted so much, God has turned his back on the church. And where the church should be dirty and touching hurt, the church is dirty with their hands in people's pocket. So Jesus asked him a question, and we getting out of here because I see y'all gone. Y'all like, he crazy. He done went somewhere else today. I didn't come here for this right here. You deserve it. Yeah, we need to get back on the song. Huh? So Jesus then gives the story of how to be humble. And it blew my mind in verse 12. He told the host, the prominent Pharisee, say, look here, partner, let me help you out. The next time you want to do a lunch with me, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, don't invite your friends. Don't bring your friends, your brothers and relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, so you will be repaid. He say, but when you give a banquet. Now, Jesus is teaching on what humility in church should look like to a prominent church person. This is like Jesus telling Joel Osteen, Bishop Joseph Walker, or Hezekiah Walker, really telling them how humility in church should look. But when you give a lunch or dinner, doc, when you put out the anniversary table, when you pull out all your stuff, but when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and then you will be blessed. Wait a minute. Wait. I'm not blessed by the stuff I have? Wait a minute. You mean to tell me that the meet Jesus on the church fan first got smart, made everybody be quiet? That's the first thing he did. He first checked them and everybody just shut up because they didn't want to answer the question because they knew he crazy. Number two, it's enough of them in there with Jesus where they could overtake him if they wanted to, but they didn't. Right? And number three, he go tell the man, he at the man dinner table, told Playboy, hey, I know you like all this other stuff you got going on, but that ain't about nothing. So let me help you out. Them songs you sing, that car you drive, the money you put up here, all that stuff ain't about nothing. Because Jesus say, if you ain't doing this, so the next time you out and you come to the feast in here, and what has happened in church is that we in here sucking up and eating up and drinking up all the food and wine, that when the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind come in the church, we don't have a place for them. Because all of y'all, all of us, are indignant sinners. We sin so much that we sin openly in church. I ain't talking about cussing. I'm talking about the sins that we do that Jesus was counterculture. Jesus say, so let me give you a lesson on humility before we get out of here. If ain't no blind people in your church, if ain't no poor people in your church, If everybody in your church come to church every week and got everything together, if they ain't crippled, if they not lame and they don't have a voice, if they blind and really they've been taught so much bad theology in their life they can't see Jesus, your church ain't blessed. Because you bought a multi-million-dollar complex, your church ain't blessed. Because you can sit at the big table, eat with the big-time people, your church ain't blessed. I thank God that Pastor Kevin go out and make ways for me because he can go eat where I can't go eat. Because they let me come eat. Gonna be trouble. Because I don't know how to just sit there when you talking crazy, when you say there's no difference between a living wage and a working wage. How can the minimum wage be something different and you openly say, this how much it costs to live in Nashville? This how much it costs, Pastor Wilson. It takes $2,000 a month to live in Nashville. But you pay somebody $8 an hour. And y'all shouting, slobbing out the mouth on Sunday. The preacher putting oil on you enough to fry chicken. And then because you poor, you say, I'm humble. No, stop. You're not humble because you silent. You humble because you ignorant. You'll shout next month. Your ignorance has you in the place you in. Your ignorance has you worshiping a God who let the rich get richer and the poor get poor. Your ignorance makes you shout when your pastor say, he died. Didn't he die? Oh, he died. They put him in a bar of tuna. Your ignorance makes you jump up when he tunes the organ up. Your ignorance makes you walk right homeless people when they need. Your ignorance lets you think the worst person on the earth is poor people. Your ignorance lets you get blessings jacked up. Your ignorance is why you single. Your ignorance is why ain't no man gonna put your ignorance. Let me run by that one. And Jesus said, I came to change the game. So Playboy, the next time you give a banquet, let me leave you some instructions. Let me leave you some instructions here throughout your week this week. I know, Pastor Kevin, they like to shout. I'm happy. I was told by one of my mentors, and people not saying anything, that mean they really listen. And I hope you convicted. Because I went ahead and found this jewel right here. He said, when you give a banquet, I got to run this in your mind. Invite the poor. Remember who he talking to. He's talking to church folk. And because the Pharisees got so quiet, because number one, he healed the man and then asked him, if your ox fall in the hole, or your son, will you go out and do it? He heals the man, and they still had nothing to say. And then verse 7, when he noticed the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable of how you should pick the low place. Then Jesus said to the host, so first he checked everybody. I don't know if the disciples was with him or not, but he checked everybody, right? And then he turns to the host. Say, look here. Next time you give a banquet, next time you at your family reunion, next time it's your pastoral anniversary, next time it's homecoming, next time y'all just having a frish fire, when you're cooking hamburgers on Natchez and hot dogs, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they can't repay you, here's the problem with church folk. We always look for something in return. So if you're not getting investment, Sersa told me today, you better have my money right, brother. This ain't for you, Sersa. You keep getting them keys, bro. He said, Don't even invite your friends, your mama, your dad, and your relatives. He say, although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. In other words, Jesus told him, charge it to the gang. And here's where we went wrong with church. We want your W-2 form. We make special enunciations in our context how you supposed to take up the offering. And then the deacons are going in the back and count the money, and if we ain't took up enough money, we gonna come back and take up another offering. And then if the preacher done killed him and raised him up, then we go ask you for some more money for the preacher. Or you could get a call like this. When you come, raise the offering after you preach. I'm not going to get a lot of money preaching this way. I understand. That's cool. Pastor Kevin, they say, preach and then raise the offering. But Jesus says, invite the poor, because poor people broke. Crippled people can't go work 40, 50 hours a week. Lame people don't have the necessary capabilities to go out and do it. And the blind, what kind of job you gonna do if you blind? Let me bring it into your context before we go home. No music today. We praying and we out of here. When the church practices humility, it does not matter if it's a multimillionaire in the house or a minuscule person who has nothing. God's grace is sufficient. And if we singing songs that you deserve it and worth, Jesus cares more about the folks who don't know their worth than he cares about you and your selfishness. Because the reason why the church can't practice humility, because all we do is win. That's going to be a theme. That I'm telling you that if all you doing is winning, then you can never see the real Jesus. Because only when you're losing will the true winner show up. So while you're walking around, it's like my pastor Tucker would say, church people spend a lot of time in the parking lot before coming, shaking themselves up to get all the junk off them, and then they come in to worship. And because you got so much junk in you and you trapped in a closet, the real people who need deliverance can't get here because you soaking it all up. And you know how you humble when you get that new car, new house, and new stuff? That ain't Jesus. You worked hard enough. Either you selling dope. When you go home, go back and revisit Luke 14, 1 through 14. On your feet. We getting out of here. We ain't singing no more. Turn it off, sirs. On your feet. I thank God for the few that are here. I thank God for the music. I thank God for Jobs for Life tonight, who are having a graduation of young men who are in jail. I thank God for the months that my friend in the back has been sober. I thank God that I ran into Franklin Community Church and Kevin showed me how to be humble. My mouth is slick, but he showed me how to be humble. I had a call on this week. You can give me a cord a little bit, wake him up a little bit. Called me this week. And he said to me, he said, I watch your dirty church on the internet. I said, thank you. Thank you for taking out your busy time. He said, Walter, he said, this guy was a main proponent of mine when I first came with Kevin. He told me I was a fool. You're crazy. How y'all gonna build a church with poor people? That's my friend. He was like, you supposed to be gone, man. You making good grade at American Baptist College, and you fourth generation on one side, second generation on the other side. And we were having Bible study down the street, and Kevin jacked all my theology up. And I found out I was ignorant. I was ignorant to the fact that I was ignorant. And he doesn't take any credit for what we've been through the last 4 years. But humility is something that you must practice every day. It's not about you letting people walk over you. It's about who you bring with you while you're walking with Christ. Humility is not that people cuss you out and you don't say anything because you're just so humble. No, that's not it. Humility is this, that I remember when God touched me. And because he touched me at my worst, I got to go help somebody to help them get better. And we make it hard. It's just that simple. Jesus said invite the poor, the lame, the blind, and the crippled. If I was to ask the question, eyes closed, you may walk, but how many of y'all in here crippled today? Just to raise a hand. Raise your hands. I'm praying for you right now. How many of you think you're blind? You may be able to see, but your spiritual eyes are dead. How many of y'all can admit that? How many of you say, I'm lame because when I want to speak, I can't say what I want to say when I want to say it? How many people here can say that I'm poor? And every once in a while, not only am I poor in my finances, I'm poor in my spirit. And then when I'm poor in my spirit, Walter, I don't want to come out nowhere. I don't want to be bothered with nobody. I want to stay to myself. This is what Jesus is. Not only the physical, but Jesus had a spiritual. This week, the challenge is, I know most of y'all ain't coming back next week, that in your humility, while you out this week, go back and read verses 1 through 14. And ask God. I know you ain't shouting, I ain't get happy today, because humility, we need to practice this, because our government is not responsible for giving us humility. It's the church's responsibility. This week, I want everybody in here, including the drummer, to find somebody who you've had an ought or issue with, eyes still closed, this week. And I want you to call and make that thing right. I want you to think about somebody who may have wronged you. This week, I want you to call them and make it right. Through that, then God is going to open up another level of humility in your life. Humility is not something you do once, it is a process. And let me encourage somebody here today who just said to themselves, I don't have the right to do that, because I've done so much wrong. I've done so. I am at the lowest place. I've done people so wrong, I can't even call them. I'm telling you right now, God is speaking to your heart. And God is getting ready to deliver you from what you're going through. One person, everybody in here. That's it. Everybody. Come on and give God a hand praise. We don't have a saying. I just want to pray for you right now. God, we thank you right now for us coming together once again. We thank you for everyone who's here, those who wanted to come and wasn't able. And God, we bless you for giving us humility. We bless you for your grace, your love, and your mercy. God, my master, if it be your will, let us all gather here next week. We thank you that you give us the strength to make it. And right now, God, let us be a beacon of light to a dying world. My master, I thank you right now for just endowing us with your love, your grace, and your peace, your understanding. God, I pray for the Honduras team who's going out. I pray for each family represented here today. And last but not least, Lord, this week, let us serve others, serve you, serve you, God, by serving others. We ask in all things, and let everyone say, amen.